The dating apps are in shambles right now. Their stock is lower than ever. Gen Z is moving away from dating apps in order to prioritize real life connections. People are quitting dating altogether, people from the age of 20 to the age of 60. You're stuck on this cycle of dating people who have no real intention of being in a relationship with you, but it's also the structure of the app, right? It's not necessarily you, like you are not the problem. The problem is that you are going out with these people who, like, the apps make it very easy for people to treat each other as expendable, thereby creating this problem.
Dating as a young person right now is actually kind of trash, and we need to talk about it. Hey guys, what's up? It's Imurgency and welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about dating in Gen Z. In the last video we talked about the state of friendships in our generation. Now it's time to take it to the next step and talk about relationships, because I think this is a very deeply nuanced conversation that oftentimes kind of gets relegated to just like more so goal-oriented dating content, like, oh, here's how you're gonna get your partner, or here's how you need to attract your partner, or these should be your standards and you should settle for no less. That's not what this video is going to be. It's more so going to be that of a discussion, talking about some of the perils of the Gen Z dating landscape, while we have a hard time dating in general, the concept of situationships, and a little bit into where we can go from here as a culture to move past where we currently are and where we have been for a while. Now, I do want to put a quick disclaimer. This video may be long, but it is not going to fully encapsulate the entirety of the dating issue with our generation, because again, this conversation is very nuanced, and you honestly can go so deeply and granularly into this conversation, whether that be dating content advice and experiences for women, men, for queer people, or whoever. Like, there is so much to this conversation, and we're not going to touch on everything. This is more so going to be from the research that I've done, as well as from my friends' experience and my experience, and general internet sentiments and y'all's sentiments, because I did ask y'all to tell me a bit about what your dating experience is like in the community section on this channel. So if I do not touch on everything, please do not think that it's going unnoticed. Everything cannot fit into one single video. So with that said, if all that sounds interesting to you, then be sure to subscribe if you're new, leave a like on this video, and to follow me on my socials on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, all at Imurgency. Also be sure to check out my Spotify show, also called Imurgency. That's going to be linked below, where you can see these types of videos over on that platform too, if that's more of your speed. But let's get into it. So to start off, dating in Gen Z. Is it hard? Is it difficult? Well, yes, and that's for so many different reasons. And I know I may be preaching to the choir here because, like I said, I did ask you all in a poll to see how y'all's dating lives were going. Out of the over 15,000 responses to the question how your dating lives are going, 62% of y'all responded, girl, what dating life? Which honestly is very real and something that we're definitely going to talk about in this video. But what I think that this small study or survey result is saying is that as Gen Z, we are collectively having a hard time with dating and approaching dating and generally navigating this space. And we see this actually so often with the abundance of dating content, advice content, story times about first date horror stories, entire internet discourses around the different complexities and nuances of dating, to series like 20v1, Pop the Balloon, Chicken Shop Date, and more revolving around dating, courtship, and the comedy and awkwardness that comes along with all of that. And people can point many fingers as to the different reasons to why Gen Z dating is so difficult and why dating as a young person in general in the current day is so difficult, and each one of them has their own validity. But for the sake of this video, we're going to talk about things like social anxiety, choice paralysis, and the plague of situationships on our dating culture. The way that the modern dating scene is set up for Gen Z right now is honestly tragic. Well, I mean, until now with this video sponsor, Built. Built helps you earn points on one of your largest expenses, that being rent. Built is a loyalty program that lets you earn points on your rent and around your neighborhood. There is no cost to join Built, and when you pay your rent through Built, you earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. And those points can then be transferred towards your favorite hotels or airlines, or even the ones that you have not heard of yet. And that is because there are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world that you can redeem your Built points towards. Your points can even be redeemed towards future rent payments and other unique experiences that only Built members can access. They've been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate, and they're designed to fit your everyday lifestyle. And if all of that sounds interesting to you, you can start earning points right now when you sign up through the link in my description or by the QR code on screen. And make sure to use my URL so they know I sent you. Thanks so much, Built, for sponsoring this video. Let's get back into it. But now let's come to a common understanding over the phases of dating and relationships, so we're all on the same page. And these stages are heavily contested depending on who you talk to, but for the sake of this video, again, we're going to try and lay down some common ground. So in the stages of dating, you first start out with the talking stage. And the talking stage arguably is the most debated stage in internet discourse around dating, because some people call it different things. Some people call talking the stage specifically before you start going on dates. Everyone has a different interpretation of the talking stage, but I want to say right now, okay, the talking stage should not be a long stage in a relationship. Unless you're in a long distance situation or have a pen pal, the talking stage solely consists of that stage where you are either texting or lightly messaging someone before you actually meet them in person for an official date. The talking stage is not this really long and drawn out stage, or shouldn't be, and in my opinion should be one of the shorter stages of this whole process. Then you move on to the dating stage. And the dating stage literally means the stage in which you are going on dates with somebody. You can be casually dating multiple people, going on dates with multiple people that you are not committed to. Some people date long term before committing officially, which is what some people may call a slow burn. But dating is casual. Generally, most people sit around this stage, going on dates, getting to know people, so on and so forth. The next stage after that is the exclusivity stage, or more so the exclusive dating stage. And this is when you are having an intentional conversation with the person you are dating, that you are pouring your energy solely into them, solely dating them. You are not in a committed relationship with them yet, but there is clear communication that you are not going on dates with anybody else. This is usually the step before a committed relationship to ensure that a relationship could potentially work out between the two of you. And finally, you have the relationship, which is a exclusive committed partnership. And I do want to say really quickly, for the sake of this video, we are only talking about monogamous relationships in this video. So yeah, there's that. Now with that framework comes our first tenet to the Gen Z dating crisis, and that is the concept of the situationship. Situationship as a term is a concept that's come out within the last 12 to 15 years, essentially describing that gray area in between the dating in relationship stage, falling somewhere in between dating, exclusively dating, in a relationship, because there is no certain commitment established, but there also generally is an agreement that you're only really messing with each other. But it's important to know that being involved with someone where there is no label or commitment does not inherently make that a situationship, as that is simply just dating. But I think that the point where it becomes a situationship is when this gray area of no commitment, no communication, and no indication of this going anywhere is more so a long-term, drawn-out thing, where it's clear that both parties' long-term intentions are not in alignment, and both parties choose to move forward with it anyway. Or when both parties agree that they're not looking for anything serious in terms of commitment and are just enjoying each other's company long-term.
I like you.
I like you too.
How much?
This much?
Oh,
Why?
I like you this much.
There's an imbalance.
What do you see when you see me?
A relationship?
Oh,
What do you see?
fun dates?
Yeah, no, I'm cool with that.
Are you?
Not really, but I'll pretend.
But you're gonna develop feelings that aren't substantiated by anything tangible.
I'll just keep hoping you'll change your mind.
Fully knowing that I won't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's delusional.
Yes,
You're gonna get hurt.
I'm aware.
Why would you put yourself through that?
Well, I'd rather have some of you than none.
I feel like I should end this before it gets to that point.
Why?
Well, the longer we see each other, the harder the blow will be on you.
So end it.
I won't.
Why?
Because I'm getting everything I want at your expense. You end it.
I won't.
Why?
Because I lack the self-respect to walk away.
What's another situationship?
Maybe we should look for people that actually want the same thing we do.
We probably should, but
And I think that most people who have dated are very familiar with the concept of situationships, because that's where a lot of relationships kind of sit at for many people. For example, the common experience of dating someone and then a few dates in having the exclusivity conversation, only for one person to say that they're not really looking for anything serious or anything, or looking to build anything right now, when the other party is looking for something serious, but they continue going on anyway. And I think that that's kind of the crux of the situationship, especially when both parties aren't in alignment, because the situation itself isn't based in a consistent reality. For one person's point of view, they're kind of happy with the company, happy where they're at, not really wanting to be locked down or in a committed relationship. And the other person is sort of feeding into that with hopes that the other will eventually change their mind and be open to committing, which in some cases can and does occasionally happen, turning into a full relationship. But in the cases that it does not, is where you see the jokes, the memes, the online banter and discourse around the situationship epidemic that we see all the time. A friend of mine actually refuses to use the term situationship because she says that it devalues the connection that those two people had. And she's always saying that she prefers the term brief lovers over situationship. And honestly, I think that's more romantic and mysterious. And maybe we should start adopting that a little bit more. Like, yes, give us the mystery, give us the angst of it all. Like, no, I wasn't in a situationship with them. We were brief lovers. We were brief lovers in the summer of 2021. That just kind of gives a little bit more in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there. But real talk, despite all the jokes and memes around situationships, they can definitely be very unhealthy, hurtful, and even lead to psychological damage. According to an article from EDU Psych, the lack of clarity and commitment can cause anxiety, uncertainty, and insecurity, leading to feelings of loneliness, depression, and low self-esteem. People in situationships often struggle with understanding this partner's intentions and expectations, leaving them with a constant sense of unease and stress. Going on to say that all of this can exacerbate mental health issues, leading to a negative self-image and a reduced sense of self-worth. So yeah, situationships are not ideal when it comes to dating when people are coming at it from two different perspectives. Like if both parties aren't in alignment and they aren't both working towards or for the same things, then that's where a lot of hurt, a lot of miscommunication, and a lot of psychological damage can be inflicted upon one or both parties. But like I said earlier, despite popular opinion, not all situationships are inherently bad, because a situationship can in fact be healthy when both parties are on the same page of not wanting that commitment but still seeing each other. And you see this all the time where people like meet a couple weeks before one of the two moves away and there isn't enough time to build a strong foundation of commitment and of the relationship. You see this also all the time when you go on vacation, find a little vacation boo. Like that is peak situationship. Like never bring those home. Never bring a vacation boo home unless you're really trying to work it out. I actually do know a couple that met over a vacation and were vacation boos and actually ended up in a relationship. Shout out to them. But another example of that. And a common part of a situationship that I feel like really does not help the concept of dating is that situationships do a lot of the same things that people in committed relationships do without the commitment. An article from Women's Health Mag states that situationships can be defined as romantic relationships that lack commitment and the associated norms and expectations. And the whole thing around situationships is like the lack of commitment and wanting to settle down with someone. Like that is the overarching, like, yes, this is why we are in a situationship, because one or both parties is not ready to settle down and commit to this relationship, which makes you wonder if we are in this loneliness epidemic and we are a generation and people that crave love and understanding and are clearly at one point interested in dating. Why are we so averse to said commitment? And one potential answer to this is vulnerability. And there is actually some research to back this. In interviews done with over 150 undergraduate students during the 2020 and 2021 academic school year, an associate professor of sociology from the School of Tulane University that goes by the name of Lisa Wade observed that Gen Z is more reluctant to define their relationships or even admitting that they want their relationships to progress, which I think is very interesting. She states that holding one's cards close to one's chest is not unique to today's young people, but Gen Z are especially unwilling to share their feelings with each other, which I find so interesting because like a common Gen Z stereotype is that we do tend to overshare. We do tend to be real and authentic and speak our mind a whole bunch. But when it comes to things that mean something to us, when it comes to that vulnerability piece with another person face to face, research seems to suggest that we struggle a little bit more with that. And there are a number of reasons why we may be afraid to commit, may be afraid to have those conversations and be open and vulnerable like that. And one of those reasons can be attributed to the rise in things like dating apps, which can dull our decision making through choice paralysis. Now, what is choice paralysis, you may ask? Analysis paralysis, sometimes referred to as choice paralysis, causes you to have an intense emotional reaction when forced to make a decision. While it's not a medical diagnosis, it's a symptom often tied to mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, and ADHD, but it can also happen even if you're not dealing with a mental health issue. A Medium article talks about this a little bit more under the paradox of choice, a theory that suggests that while choice is good, too much of it can lead to decision paralysis, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. It's like standing in front of a gigantic menu at a restaurant, feeling overwhelmed and fearing you'll pick the wrong dish. And this is sort of where dating apps come into play. Again, preaching to the choir because likely most of us have been on a dating app at one point or another. And let's be honest, the experience is not great. There are definitely many success stories of people finding the one on things like dating apps. But for the majority of people, that just is not the case. And these companies kind of bank on that. Like dating apps would not be as popular and as lucrative if they actually worked most of the time. And one of the pitfalls of dating apps is that it gives you the illusion of choice, essentially emboldening people and making them more so unwilling to commit to somebody because they have that idea in the back of their mind that there could be someone better out there for them. And that someone better is easily accessible from a couple countless swipes, with these dating apps having a seemingly unlimited amount of people to swipe on and making it seem that through numbers, people have more options than they actually do. And even outside of dating specific apps, this can be seen across the board with social media on platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and even TikTok, allowing people to be exposed to even more people than they would have been able to encounter organically. And when it comes to the surplus of options and visibility of people, it's generally seen as a good thing, interacting and meeting more people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, and different parts of the world. But when it comes to dating, that's not necessarily to your advantage, because truly, when you think about it, we were never intended to know and get to know and fawn over this many people and potential partners in a lifetime. Because when you think about it, for most of human history prior to dating apps and prior to like internet and globalization or whatever, the size of your world would be substantially smaller, and the dating pool that you would have would be substantially smaller, confined to people that you see on the street or people that you know through friends of friends. Or if you want to say through media, people you'd see on TV or hear on radio. Like, the prospective dating pool has never been this large, even though technically and realistically, it still kind of isn't. It's the visibility of it all that gives us that illusion of choice, that we have more options than we actually do. And people tend to forget that just because there are more people out there, that does not mean that those people in those options are presenting themselves authentically. One of your options, and again, I'm using quotes because equating people to an option is crazy, could just be someone that you're attracted to based on what they want you to see and want you to know about them from their profiles online, which could be drastically different from the person that they are in real life. Additionally, attraction and exposure do not directly equate to compatibility, which then also leads to more short-term and fleeting connections, under the idea that the grass is greener anywhere else. Like, just because you like somebody's face online does not mean that you are inherently compatible. And one of the problems with dating apps is that, like, you can't really and truly sort good from bad, because there's no way to really know who a person is outside of the profile that they present, based on very limited and voluntary information. Like, you truly never know what you're going to get until you get there, which normally is like duh, but when it comes to meeting people online where you don't get that feeler for them initially in person, that can put people in awkward positions or even positions of danger. Which leads us to our next point about the rise of surveillance culture in dating. When you think of dating, surveillance is not necessarily the first thing that comes to your mind, but it really has become more so ingrained in younger, specifically Gen Z dating culture. And when it comes to dating trends, I try not to say that like, yeah, this is a Gen Z specific thing, because for a lot of things in relation to dating, many things are not new or novel. Dating and the process of courtship has been going on since the beginning of human history, but when it comes to the level and degree of surveillance in everyday dating and courtship, this is where things kind of get a little bit more novel for us as young people. Now, what is surveillance culture? Surveillance culture is candidly where people are tracked and monitored through devices such as your smartphones when you mention something in person and then you get an ad for it a little bit later, GPS, CCTV cameras, and ultimately, and more so recently in relation to dating, social media. The culture of surveillance, to borrow David Lyon's term, is a culture where questions about privacy and publicness and rights and benefits are once again brought to the forefront. Whether it's our apps or ourselves, we are constantly, whether we are intentionally doing it or not, surveilling each other, ranking each other, and sizing each other up based on information that we have not yet gotten from the person of interest in person, if that makes sense. Like, you have apps that not so secretly have things like rating systems to put you in front of people that the algorithm believes you'd have better chances with, or the almost normalized process of internet stalking someone before you meet them so that you know entirely too much about them before you even know how they would sound saying your name in real life. And this surveillance into private people's personal lives can be one of the factors that really contributes to the lack of vulnerability that we've been talking about, that leads people to their lack of commitment and wanting to be honest about how they're feeling. In an article from the New Republic, there are subtle ways in which the increasing digitization of our social and professional lives encourages us to surveil potential mates and assume they are doing likewise. Daters are now replicating state surveillance, says lawyers and surveillance expert Heidi Boghusen. You might research, or put less kindly, stalk someone before meeting them. In theory, it's harmless, even sometimes necessary given risks of meeting strangers, where it comes with what she calls a chilling effect. When we know we're being monitored, we act differently, and it creates a distance between ourselves and our intimates. And this really shows when we want to talk about things like vulnerability and authenticity. Like, you'd think, like, if it's common knowledge that someone you're going on a date with has likely internet stalked you before meeting you, that it would give you some sense of solace that, like, okay, they at least know the base amount of stuff of me that's online. I can be honest and open about that because they already know. But in reality, this can have the opposite effect, because you're now not able to show up as authentically. Because the thing with internet stalking is that, like, yeah, you can get a bunch of information, but like, you don't really have the context behind how all of that really creates and molds a person, and it's harder to show up as authentically and as vulnerably. And if you're going in with the prior knowledge of like, yeah, this person has probably looked me up and knows some things about me and has already come to some conclusions about my life or how I like to live it, which again, if you feel like you're being monitored or feel like you're being surveilled, you're going to act differently than if you did not feel that way and felt more natural. It's kind of not exactly like the phenomenon of like when you point a camera at someone and start recording, they automatically start acting different than they would just plainly. That same article goes on to say that a bigger issue is that people may be hesitant to share vulnerabilities, past mistakes, or unconventional interests or tastes. Going on to say that the big picture is that it can possibly lead to an erosion of trust and intimacy in relationships, which I think is wrong when we talk about how the whole practice of dating has been brought online as well. Whether it's on dating apps or in person on actual dates, people are more on their guard and can be more hesitant to be vulnerable because it is a lot more common for people to bring their dating experiences and their dating journey to the greater internet. Like there have been multiple trends where people are posting their experiences on apps like Hinge, on Tinder, publicly thirsting over people's profiles and bringing that to a larger audience of people that I'm sure that the initial dater did not really consider, or just talking about their dating experiences with people in great detail. And I do want to say before I say anything else, there's nothing inherently bad I want to say about doing that, but it also does, again, kind of work against the whole vulnerability thing and showing up authentically thing, because you don't want to find yourself in one of these videos where someone's making fun of you for being yourself on your profile or like being a little cringy or being a little goofy. So you either see people intentionally lean into it and make their profiles more goofy, again, taking the seriousness out of dating, which inherently isn't bad, but again, can confuse people on what their actual intentions are, or you have people just generally withdrawing or being hesitant to be on these apps or be their true authentic self on these apps, feeding into the cycle of inauthenticity and just showing the highlights or their best version of themselves that they want other people to see. But when we talk about the nature of like dating story times, I think that this is especially interesting because I think that you 100% should share your experiences going through life and going through dating with people. And none of this is to say that you shouldn't talk about dates, especially when they are disaster dates, in order to prevent other people from potentially matching with or going through a similar experience with people that are either generally terrible, traumatizing, or outwardly dangerous. But I think that when it comes to most of these like dating story times or these disaster dates, or at least the ones that I've seen on my For You page, that's usually never the case. And a lot of the time, they're just stories about awkward or just mildly inconvenient dates, which I mean are going to happen, you know? And I get the relatability factor, and I get that you're doing it to like tell your story and recount like what's happened in your life. And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it does play into people's hesitancy to be vulnerable and to be open out of fear of having their personal life be put on blast, when that's not necessarily what daters are setting up for. And also when it comes to surveillance, you have things like, are we dating the same guy groups? And while groups like this are mostly for safety reasons, it still shows as a form of surveillance. You have instances like West Elm Caleb, the trending clips where multiple people would come online to talk about their experience with this guy Caleb who worked at West Elm, who would love bomb and go through the same exact processes with multiple different people, essentially ghosting them all in the same way, and having people come on social media to talk about their same experiences with them and to find some kind of solace and community in the fact that like, dang, this guy did us all dirty in the same way. Now, I'm not gonna hold you, we're about to take a hard pivot because we talked a lot about general dating within Gen Z and within young people. Now, let's get gay. Because I think that this is a conversation that isn't had nearly as much, and that's the fact that like dating within the straight community and dating in the gay community are completely different experiences. And while there are some similarities, a lot of the issues that plague both communities are inherently different. Like when it comes to things like dating apps, people joke that like Tinder is like straight people's Grindr, and like with many straight people saying like, oh, I wish that there was an app like Grindr for straight people. Do you really? I think you need to be careful about what you ask for. But I think that kind of speaks to the issue where like there are a plethora of apps geared towards everybody, but initially for straight people to like date, meet, and really build connection. Although the success rate of that is what it is, you know. When it comes to the queer community, a lot of the gay focused or queer focused dating apps are not dating apps at all. Actually, they are for the most part socialized to be hookup apps. Of course, there are people that try and date on Grindr, and there have been many discourses online that have sprung up out of people choosing to go that route. But most of these apps are purely for a physical connection, if you get what I'm saying. Which makes you wonder like, okay, how are queer people supposed to really meet then? Or really go on these dates then, if the current apps made specifically for them are mostly used for hookup apps? And as a result of this, queer people often move to the more generalized apps like Hinge and Tinder to find more intentional dating partners. And I use that pretty loosely because oftentimes what ends up happening is like people just get like the next stage up from a hookup, i.e. a situationship. So it's not like people are super serious on there either, but it just makes you question like, what message is it saying that like all of the queer focused dating apps revolve around hookups and not around like building genuine relationships or like more serious relationships, you know? And I think that when it comes to the queer dating experience, and this isn't inherent to Gen Z, I think this is across the board, is that the experience is especially nuanced because there are different factors, standards, expectations, and norms in queer dating communities than for the straight ones. Because in the gay community, desirability is a large part of trying to form these connections. And oftentimes it can go beyond just romantic or partners. Like even for friendships, desirability is a thing. Like there are definitely groups of people that like won't be your friend unless you look a certain way or you act a certain way. With things like masculinity, having a desirable body type, certain features, and having a certain color to you be rampantly coveted. And again, I don't want to say that these things are necessarily exclusive to the queer community, but they definitely are more so common and more so prevalent that genuinely affect the state and quality of dating in this community. Having feelings or doubts that you aren't masculine enough, or at least masculine presenting enough to be taken seriously or desired, or capable of being romantically loved is a real issue for a lot of queer men and has been working on being deconstructed little by little. But it's definitely something that plays into the whole issue of Gen Z dating. Okay, that was a little gay pit stop. Let's talk about creators and influencers because this really has been doing a number on Gen Z. Dating and relationship content influencers are honestly more present than ever. Like the average person's access to relationship information and relationship content online has definitely increased, which in the words from a BBC article has empowered Gen Z with the language they need to articulate both who they are as well as what they want from a relationship that doesn't compromise their identity and needs, and also can sort of be a little problematic. Like for example, a lot of dating advice targeted towards women often put the onus of men's behavior on women as if it's their own personal shortcoming. A man being afraid of commitment or a player or taking advantage of a woman is not her fault, and there isn't anything that she's done to warrant that bad behavior except for her being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And a lot of dating advice geared both towards women and for men, especially in the language, almost transforms women into prizes to gain as opposed to people to get to know, when the focus for both parties should just be to know yourself and your interests and to find someone that matches with those. With also a lot of dating content geared towards young people being based around strategy and games. Like do this to get him or her to like you. He or she is not responding, do this trick to make him or her chase you. And it's gotten to the point where if dating advice is not of that sort and does not focus around making the other person a prize or something to win or something to work for, then you're kind of seen as crazy. And additionally, a lot of the dating content out there is based on really heteronormative standards and traditional gender roles. This is where we see things like men should be paying for dates, splitting bills, the woman's role in the household or in the relationship. And of course, we're seeing a rise in this content specifically based on where we are as a culture right now. We just saw the whole rise of trad wife culture, and we've been gradually seeing over the past decade or so the rise of like alpha male dating, where a lot of men's dating content revolves around equating dating also to some form of strategy or game that you're either supposed to win or where the results are fixed against you because of X, Y, or Z. And unfortunately, a lot of this dating content, especially content revolving around more traditional dating values and gender roles, does lead people down more conservative alt-right pipelines. And again, we've been seeing the result of that. See some of my prior videos. And I think something to note when it comes to these more traditional values in dating that we've been seeing become more relevant in Gen Z, whether that be in the abundance of discourses that happen online regarding dating, like the 50-50 debate, like whose grandma's the baby, is the mom or the girlfriend sitting in the front seat, like all of this discourse that happens online is insane. And a lot of it and the expectations around it. It is based on a reality that is not ours anymore for the majority of people. Like the traditional gender roles for dating that people aspire to or that people say that they want in dating relationships and heterosexual dating relationships aren't possible for the majority of people because of the world that we currently live in. It's both very difficult for a man under 30 to be the full provider for himself and for his partner. And with that, it's also equally as hard for the woman to just be a homemaker or to be a trad wife unless one or both of them are rich, because she also has to work and won't have the time to be a homemaker. Like it feels like a lot of people are wanting these lifestyles that are very akin to the lifestyles that happened in the 1960s and 70s, without accounting for the very real differences in society and culture between those times. According to a BBC article, back in the 1960s and 70s, your average 25-year-old man could support a family with his income and not expect his wife to work. For many Gen Zers, the idea that a 25-year-old could support an entire family and that a man would expect a stay-at-home wife no longer fits contemporary circumstances, and for some, seems even laughable. The economy is different, the culture is different, and the opportunities are very different. Like I think we really idolize, when it comes to dating, this notion of like old school love. Like I want my parents' kind of love. I want that kind of love and relationship and stability that I saw growing up in the media that I consumed. But it's important to understand also that even in those times when that was economically feasible, right? And more so the cultural norm, there also was a lot of bad that came with that. And also, when it comes to like our parents' love or wanting something like that, as a child, we don't know the full story. Like there's always more to the love story than is let on. Like there are likely behaviors that are excused, things that had to happen and bridges that had to have been crossed between two people that we as a culture barely have the strength, emotional vulnerability, and tenacity to bear through. Like no shade, how are you supposed to get through economic hardship, infidelity allegations, when you're afraid to have a conversation with someone asking, what are we? Like, you know, and that's not even accounting for all the inequality that was happening during that time. I think we've been romanticizing a version of the past that never really existed. Like we are setting our ideals for a reality that was never actually there. So nowadays when we're talking about things that we're looking for and we're setting this idea like we want our parents' marriage or like we want the type of marriage that we saw on TV, like maybe just maybe that wasn't all that we thought it was and we don't have the full story, and what we're idealizing is something that they didn't even have. And again, not to say that isn't possible, but I think it's important to like understand what it would take to get there, you know? And with all that said, because of all this, we've been seeing a rise in people move dating offline, leaving dating apps behind. And this can all be seen as a giant response to these tech companies and to these dating apps, sort of as an act of rebellion, taking the power back from these dating app companies and to put the futures of our romantic prospects and our romantic lives back in our own hands. And that sounded really empowering, right? Well, the issue with that is like, in order to actually do that, we need to go outside. And meeting people organically in today's world is not the easiest thing to do. Because for one, first and foremost, there aren't a ton of third places and spaces for people to organically meet. Young people to organically meet. This is for people to organically meet. Young people to organically meet that aren't explicitly like those cringy dating mixers. Like those single nights, those dating mixers. And that kind of leaves you to go out in the wild and kind of exist where you either got to go out to the club and go out at night, but if that's not your speed, then it's kind of like, oh, I don't want to date someone who goes to the club if I don't go to the club. Or two, you go to hobby spots, which is why we saw such a big boom for run clubs and pickleball last year. As yes, one, a form of exercise and hobby, but two, a third place for you to find people to date. And again, and I've also made a whole video talking about that, but to summarize, the issue with that is like if you don't like to run and you find a runner, there's an incompatibility there. You're not going to find your people. And also for a lot of these spaces, especially the hobby spaces, require you to live by or to enjoy that kind of lifestyle. And for those that don't necessarily love physical exercise or aren't able-bodied to do that sort of thing, then your options look a little different and a little bit more limited in that sense, which is where we get to the point where people have just started to give up on dating. And this is a very real thing. A lot of people have just kind of given up on the concept of dating, like not actively looking. Like if something comes to me, I'll entertain it, but you know, I'm not really focused on dating right now. I'm not really focused on finding a relationship. I'm just focusing on my relationship. I'm just focusing on my friendships and focusing on myself. Great. But let's talk about exactly why that is. One can hypothesize that since Gen Z is kind of jaded with the whole dating scene and also seemingly less into commitment, that it can mean that we're using this time of singleness to really invest in our casual relationships and sexual encounters. But statistically, Gen Z is having less intercourse than previous generations and really prioritizing singlehood. For years, studies have shown a decline in the rates of American high school students having intercourse. That trend continued, but not surprisingly, the first few years of the pandemic, according to a recent survey by the CDC. The study found that 30% of teens or 21 said that they had intercourse, down from 38% in 2019. And statistically, surprisingly or not, Gen Z is dating less than other generations. A survey conducted by the Survey Center on American Life found that only 56% of Gen Z adults and 54% of Gen Z men said that they're involved in romantic relationships at any point during their teenage years. And this represents a remarkable change from previous generations where teenage dating was much more common. More than 3/4 of baby boomers and Gen Xers reported having a boyfriend or girlfriend as teenagers. The stats go on to state that 44% of Gen Z men today have reported having no relationship experience at all during their teen years, double the rate of older men. So people are dating, and we've talked about the many reasons as to why, so it's not really a shocker. And it's really understandable as why many people have given up, like even y'all. Like again, I asked y'all to talk about your dating lives, and some of the top comments were about how y'all have given up on dating. With some of y'all saying, I'm personally happily single and choosing to prioritize my friendships over a relationship. If one falls into my lap, then fine, but I'm not actively looking by any means. As a dude, I think I've given up on that right now. I'm more worried about supporting myself financially and fully realizing my emotional well-being and maturity before I can give that energy to someone else. I need to learn to give myself love before I can give that to anyone else. In another reading, I rarely find a connection with people, and when I do, I'm so tired of doing all the emotional labor in relationships and getting nothing back. I don't want to be single, but it's what's best for me right now. And honestly, I hear you. people are tired of the rat race of dating right now. And there's a large portion of us that are just disillusioned with the whole concept of finding a partner at this point. And that's okay. Having a partner or dating is not some prize, but it's also okay to want that form of connection, you know? And I think that the rightful response from a lot of people is to then start investing in yourself and really working on loving yourself and the people around you. And I think that that's a really great thing, but, you know, there's always a but. I think sometimes we do get things a little bit twisted where the reaction to then not dating is to get your life together and not necessarily yourself together, if that makes sense. Like, you always hear the thing like, you can't love someone unless you love yourself. But I also do think there's a difference between having your stuff or your life together and loving yourself, you know? Like, one can argue that trying to have your stuff together or actively working towards getting your life together is a form of self-love. Like, for example, one of my friends let me share her story here. A great social network and hit all of the other milestones in life that she wanted to at that point in her life, yet was still having a hard time navigating dating spaces and the dating aspect of her life because she felt so insecure despite having all of that. And she didn't feel like she was in the proper space to date, so she didn't. Which goes to show that, yeah, you can have your stuff together, you can get your life together, but if what's going on internally isn't necessarily there, then maybe that's what you need to work on. A lot of us Gen Z aren't dating because the state of the world isn't allowing us to. And we want to be able to focus that we're more well-adjusted before pursuing commitments to others. And I think that that's a responsible thing to do, but I also think that we need to be careful to not take it too far. Like, I think sometimes we might overcorrect and feel like we need to be perfect or need to be in like the best state of our lives, mentally, physically, economically, or whatever, before we can even think of entertaining a partner. And while I think that it's great that people are prioritizing themselves and wanting to work on themselves, I think it's also important to know that that is not necessarily a requirement for you to deserve or find love. Like, you don't need to be the absolute best version of yourself to find that love or to even deserve that love. And I think it gets kind of tricky when you start associating like perfection or like being at your best with being deserving or not of love, because that can be very daunting or even discouraging if you're questing over a version of yourself that is kind of abstract in the way that it can exist. I'm here to tell you that it's, for one, okay to not date, and it's also okay to date and not be perfect or not feel perfect. There are tons of people in the world that are actively in relationships right now that are not their best selves, and they're working towards it, but that perfection isn't a requirement, because you can still be perfect and single. You could still be perfectly self-assured, self-confident, or whatever, and still be single and still struggle to find love. It's just that self-piece that's complete, which again is a great thing, but you shouldn't relegate yourself to only be open to a relationship or only be open to something if you are in like the best state of your life, is what I'm trying to say. And I guess at the end of the day, your happiness and safety should be really prioritized. Dating is hard and has always been hard, but the reasons why dating is hard right now are not all new reasons. There are just different avenues in which they are coming up in ways that we have to tackle it. And just because dating is hard does not mean that it is impossible. And if finding a partner and finding love is something that you are looking for and something that you crave, that is still something that can be possible for you and something that you are deserving and worthy of, despite what the thoughts up here may tell you. But yeah, this video was a big yap session. We did have some research, but there was not like a set like, this is why Gen Z is like this. But I really hope you enjoyed it. We did yap for a while. So if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Again, if you're new to the channel, then definitely subscribe, leave a like, and follow me on my social media on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Also, let me know down in the comments, what do you think about the state of Gen Z dating? What's been your experience dating? And do you feel like we're approaching a corner in any way? Thank you so much for watching. I've been Imurgency, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.